Now, it is fair to say it's been a pretty tumultuous few days in the world of politics, with the resignation of two of Boris Johnson's senior advisers, and that ahead of a crucial week of Brexit talks. Plenty of reaction, no doubt, coming up now. Let's look through the toings and froings with Sarah Southern, comedian, former aide to David Cameron, and Sonia Sodha, chief leader writer at The Observer and former senior policy advisor to Ed Miliband. Good afternoon to you both. Sarah Southern, have you seen anything like this soap opera before?
No, it's been quite the week, hasn't it? I don't think that the public were expecting, in the middle of a pandemic and 6 weeks away from us Brexiting, that we'd see key members of staff leaving Number 10 in such a dramatic way. It has been a bit of a soap opera, and perhaps one that is a bit disappointing, to be perfectly honest.
Why disappointing? Not as good as it could be? I mean, there's plenty of acrimony and tears, as we're led to believe.
Well, yeah, that's what's so disappointing. You know, we are dealing with such a huge pandemic, something that's having such a huge impact on everybody's lives. And the Prime Minister should really have a grip on his staff in Downing Street, surely. You know, I think Dominic Cummings and his trip to Barnard Castle has certainly dominated since May, or whenever it was that story came out. Perhaps that departure should have come a bit earlier.
Sonia Sodha, do you agree Dominic Cummings should have gone after the Barnard Castle fiasco?
Absolutely, and I think it's a sign of how dependent and how weak a Prime Minister Boris Johnson is, that he was so subordinate to his advisor, Dominic Cummings, that he wasn't prepared to sack him over a breach of lockdown guidelines, you know, in the middle of a global pandemic. It really shows where Boris Johnson's priorities are. And I agree with Sarah, actually. I think viewers who've seen this sort of meltdown in Number 10, this really sort of poisonous briefing and counter briefing. I mean, God, it's you know, about how some people in Number 10 were calling the Prime Minister's fiancée Princess Nutnuts. I mean, literally, we're in the middle of a global pandemic that's killed tens of thousands of British people, and this is what's going on in Number 10, and this is what the Prime Minister's advisors are seeing fit to brief the papers about. It's just a complete and utter disgrace, to be honest. And I agree with Sarah. I mean, it's got real world relevance because of who Dominic Cummings is, because he's been so important in the Prime Minister's strategies around Brexit, around picking culture war fights, you know, whether it's with anti-racist campaigners or against asylum seekers who are drowning in the Channel. So he's been very critical to the Prime Minister's strategy, so which is why his departure is worth passing comment on. But all of these games that are going on in Number 10, they're just a distraction from running the country and from getting things that the government has bungled to date, like its track and trace infrastructure, right.
And would you suggest, Sonia Sodha, then, that Carrie Symonds has a lot of sway as things go? That's what seems to have happened the past few days.
But I mean, it would be really weird, I think, for the Prime Minister not to be influenced by his partner. You know, it's a stressful job, and I'm sure lots of viewers, you know, when they've got really tough work decisions to make, who are you going to ask for advice? Your partner is probably one of the people that you will turn to. So to me, it's kind of no surprise that the Prime Minister's partner might be influential in shaping his thinking. I think we've probably seen that with every Prime Minister to date, including, you know, Philip May, you know, Sherry Blair, Samantha Cameron. So it's not a surprise to me. I think the fact that we're all talking about it is a sign of how poisonous the briefings and counter briefings have got in Number 10. I don't think it's a surprise that the Prime Minister, you know, consults his partner about important decisions that he's taking.
Yeah, Sarah Southern, what do you think the public makes of all this toxicity?
I don't think they like it. You know, it's a year ago since we're in the middle of a general election campaign that Boris managed to get an 80-seat majority. People were expecting this kind of oven-ready Brexit deal to be delivered. Obviously, the pandemic has kind of set things slightly to the side over the past 9 months, but they expected a clear leadership from Boris. You know, that's one of the reasons that they tried to put out Theresa May. So I think there will be disappointment from the public and the people who voted for Boris that he's not delivering on what they expected at the moment.
We hear that Boris Johnson will attempt to reassert control over his government in the coming days. So just who is in charge of the country?
Boris is in charge of the country, that is for sure. I think he needs to make some clear decisions in the coming days, very swiftly, one would assume, in putting in some new staff into Number 10 and really focusing on getting all of the testing sorted, which I think they're nearly there with, getting the vaccine to the point that it can be given to the public, and also making sure that we're ready for Brexit on the 31st of December.
Sonia Sodha, is Boris Johnson seen by some as some kind of puppet figure being controlled by Dominic Cummings and others there?
Well, you know, I think what's very clear is that Boris Johnson is an incredibly indecisive Prime Minister. He's weak. We saw that in the fact that he kept Dominic Cummings on even when he broke lockdown, the lockdown rules. And he changes his mind on things. You know, he reportedly wrote two newspaper columns, one for staying in the EU and one for leaving the EU before he took his decision about which side to back. And I think that decision about which side to back was very much about not what's in the country's interest, but what's in Boris Johnson's interest and what was most likely to make him Prime Minister. So, yeah, he's a weak, indecisive man. He relies very heavily on his advisors. I think he's relied very, very heavily on Dominic Cummings. But I'm sceptical that Dominic Cummings' departure is going to mark a departure of that very sort of toxic style of politics, which is, you know, picking fights, making kind of false promises to voters. I'm sceptical that's going to go away. I think that's Boris Johnson sees that sort of populism where, you know, you tell the public that if we leave the EU, that's going to free up £350 million a week for the NHS, a claim that has been regarded by the UK Statistics Authority as a misuse of official statistics.
Let me come in there. It's a crucial week for Brexit, of course, isn't it? We've heard this morning Simon Coveney saying a deal is doable, but there's serious doubts. Can the Prime Minister get a grip and lead us through these negotiations in what's going to be a very, very important week? Sonia Sodha first, briefly.
I mean, I think it's very clear that these negotiations are at a critical stage and it's going to be really difficult. I personally think it's better to see what comes out of the negotiations and listen to the briefing going in, because we know from this government, it's got a track record, Boris Johnson's government, of going into negotiations saying, we're absolutely not going to capitulate on any of our red lines, and then they come back and they've struck some sort of deal that absolutely capitulates on those red lines and they present it as a success. So I think going into negotiations, you always have people talking very, very tough. And to be honest, you can put some of that to one side. But I think whether or not a deal is reached will depend very much on how much the UK government wants a deal and the extent to which they think the country can cope with a no-deal Brexit come next January. But it's really extraordinary. I think when we just take a step back, it is extraordinary that in the middle of a global pandemic where businesses are already struggling, they've got huge things they need to cope with. It's just extraordinary that the government...
we're running out of time. So Sarah Southern, a word with you. How do you think this week will go? I mean, signs not very optimistic of any deal.
I'm a bit optimistic, I'd have to admit. I think that with only a finite period of time left to go, about 6 weeks, I think the EU and the UK are going to kind of find a middle ground and we're going to get a deal, and Boris is definitely going to get it for us.
Well, we will see what happens. As we say, a week is a long time in politics. Sarah Southern and Sonia Sodha, thank you very much indeed for your time today.